Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 212 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book came out in November. It's called From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing. Go and pick that up on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, just like our next guest, I also talk about sexual assault prevention on college campuses. And the best moment for me was when I was talking on a campus in the Northeast and a young woman came up to me after the program to say thank you. She explained that she was a survivor of sexual assault from that particular campus, but nobody else had come to her campus to talk about this issue since she became a student there. And the fact that it was a fraternity man speaking to her campus showed her what real fraternity is, and that we as fraternity and sorority leaders, we can use our social capital on college campuses to make it a safer place and more in line with our fraternity and sorority values and ideals. That's when I knew that we needed to engage college students on this topic every single semester. And I hope that with Kim's help, with Jamie's help, and all the other great speakers that we have in the industry, that we can make this dream a reality to help prevent sexual assaults from happening in the future and better support survivors that are on our college campuses. Our next guest is Kimberly Corban. She grew up in Greeley, Colorado, and still has the pleasure of calling the Rocky Mountain State home. In May of 2006, Kimberly's life was irrevocably challenged. I'm going to mess that one up. It was changed forever when a stranger broke into her college apartment, held her there for 2 hours, and ultimately raped her. She immediately reported the crime to the authorities and served as the key witness in her attacker's trial, successfully garnering a sexual assault conviction. Kimberly has been featured on many major news networks. We're talking about CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and much more. She often lends her voice to multiple syndicated radio programs and print media. So we're talking about the Washington Post, Cosmopolitan Magazine, Elle Magazine, MSN.com, the New York Times, and countless other online publications. Today, she has followed her true passion and tours the country, speaking to campuses and organizations about sexual assault education and victim advocacy. Her recent TED Talk, it's phenomenal. I went back and I watched it for the second time. It's called How My Sexual Assault Was Hijacked by Politicians and Lobbies. This TED Talk has received high praise and has sparked both timely and timeless conversations about survivors of abuse. She is a mother to 4 young children. Kimberly stays plenty active and has no shame in singing Disney songs at full volume with her kids. Her husband, Michael, is as fiercely supportive as he is quick to roll his eyes at her very punny sense of humor. Kimberly hates running, yet does it anyway. Me too. Loves all things that have to do with llamas. She's a serious movie quoting buff and is not very sarcastic. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Hi, thanks for having me. Wow, my bio really does tell you pretty much everything you need to know.
Like, we could just stop the interview right now. This tells your life story, right?
Clearly, I wrote it myself because, yep, that's what you get here.
I mean, you know, I'm just so proud of the advocacy work that you're doing in this arena. I think it's absolutely fantastic. As you know, I've just been a fan of yours for a very long time. You know, I've read your stories, I've seen your videos, and I think it's all amazing. So I think our listeners are in for a huge treat to hear directly from you. And there's so many questions that I was thinking about while I was thinking about this interview. I knew it was coming up, and I said, you know what, I have a whole bunch of things I need to ask. And so let's go all the way back to UNC, the University of Northern Colorado. That's where you did your undergraduate experience and your master's program, by the way. So I'm wondering, why was Northern Colorado the right choice for you?
So I'm going to give you the truthful version here.
All right.
Grew up in Greeley and went to high school here. I did a campus tour actually of UNC when I was a senior in high school, and I walked into the business college and they had the stock market ticker going around the inside that's just like right as you go in. And I thought, this is what I want to do. Do I want to do the stock market? Absolutely not. But it looked really cool. So that was the selling point. I would love to tell you that it was some like amazing experience and this is where my no, it was a stock market ticker that I didn't even end up doing anything with while I was there. Cool.
That's so funny. I mean, honestly, students choose college campuses for the weirdest reasons, the weirdest amenities.
I like the mascot. No,
You know what I mean?
but I loved that it was close enough to home, but I also went to the dorms my freshman year and had that on-campus experience. And so it didn't feel like, hey, this is the same place that I've lived in for my entire life. It was literally going to the other side of town and starting what felt like a brand new life with new friends and a different capacity just to experience school and everything that I thought that I already knew about my hometown. So I was really happy with my choice. I was a business marketing major for the first couple of years at school. And so while I did have business classes, never ended up in stock market classes.
But it looked really cool.
It looked awesome. It's still there. But I was very active when I was in high school and really all throughout, K through 12. I was involved in sports and different clubs, and I was on the executive council for student council and like just the long list of all of the things. Well, I got to college and decided I just want to be a student. That lasted, a whole couple of months. And finally I came back in the spring and I was like, yep, I need to do something. I want to get involved in something. Anybody who knew me growing up knew that you're rushing for a sorority, like what? And I ended up making my best friends there. So I was a COB in the spring of 2005, and I went to Alpha Phi, and it has just been the most incredible experience. And I'm glad I took that leap outside of my comfort zone to join such an amazing organization, because I knew nothing about Greek life beforehand.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Greek life going into college. I mean, both my parents are from another country, so they certainly didn't tell me anything about it. But I'm wondering, why was it Alpha Phi? I mean, there were other organizations you could have gone to. Why Alpha Phi?
At UNC, the Greek life community is pretty small, compared at least to some of these larger colleges. But Alpha Phi had a couple girls that I knew from different classes. The biggest kicker for me was that my cousin back in Illinois had been an Alpha Phi. And so I was like, oh, I can do the same thing. And I don't know, it just kind of clicked. And I didn't know a whole lot of them. I didn't really know what being in Greek life entailed, but everything that I learned about them it felt like home walking in. It was different, of course, but I felt comfortable enough to be myself there. And that was when I knew that, all right, this is the organization that I want to join.
I love it. Makes total sense to me. Now, I want to talk about what happened in 2006 to you. And I think now is a good time for us to put in a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about sexual assault in this particular episode. So if for any reason this conversation gets tough for you, feel free to pause it, walk out of the room, do whatever you got to do, because we certainly know that when we're talking to college students, probably 25% of the students that are going to be listening right now themselves are survivors of sexual assault. So knowing that, if this is a difficult conversation for you, please take care of yourself first. That's the most important thing to us. Now, in 2006, a stranger broke into your apartment, held you captive for 2 hours, and then ultimately raped you. Your testimony led to his arrest and his conviction, which is such a small percentage of the total cases when we have an arrest and a conviction. And many cases, as you know, they go unreported for so many reasons. I mean, we could spend a whole episode talking about why it's not reported. But what made you come forward to tell your story and then go from victim to survivor?
Sure. I think it's important to point out that, yes, I am statistically a rarity. What I am going to tell you does not reflect the instances where it's an acquaintance, where you don't choose to come forward, where it's family-centered violence. There are so many different things that take place with far more frequency than the stranger who breaks into your home. But that's what happened to me. And I lived my entire life in a bubble thinking nothing bad will ever happen. until it did. So there were 6 of us Alpha Phi girls that were best friends that moved off campus for our junior year. We split up into two apartments. So it was 3 and 3. We were in ground floor apartments, and it was about a week after we finished the spring semester in 2006 that we were getting everything moved in and situated for the summer. And on the morning of May 12th, a man broke into that apartment, and I was awakened with a shirt covering my face and being suffocated. And that morning, just everything in my life completely changed. It was that one act by that one person that changed the entire trajectory of not just my life, but my roommates, my family, my friends, and frankly, most of the community that I was a part of. So I didn't really think twice about reporting. And I say that only because during the assault, I knew that what was happening was a crime. That's not typical. There are so many people where something like this is happening and maybe it doesn't feel right, or maybe you just know that you didn't give this person permission to do that. And afterwards, it leaves you second guessing and almost gaslighting yourself. I knew somebody broke in here. They don't have permission to be in my home, in my room, in my bed, and they are violating my body in a way that I did not give permission for. That's the crux of rape. There's no such thing as consensual rape, consensual sex. We hear that all the time about consent. The fact of the matter is rape is a crime when consent is not there. And then you have sex, which is a consensual act between 2 adults. That's the difference. They may look alike from the outside, but they're completely separate things. So I made the choice to report when I finally survived and I saw the sun coming up through my blinds, and I had just laid there for the entire extra hour that I kept in there talking, hoping and praying that somebody would walk by and save me, and no one ever did. When I finally convinced him to leave, it was then that I grabbed my cell phone that was sitting right on my bookcase headboard and immediately called 911. Now, in my keynote speeches, I do provide a trigger warning, and I play that 911 call because I feel like it's important for audiences to understand that the person that you're hearing right now, person that's standing in front of you on the stage, is not the same person that made that call that morning. The first moments after you experience some kind of trauma where you legitimately feel like you could die at any moment changes who you are at the core. So I made that call. I got through to the operators, but from the time that I made that first call to the phone dropping to going into where my roommate had been sleeping the entire time and finally reading off a piece of mail that had our address on it, it was 16 minutes. And that person was long gone by then. The day of that first morning of a victim, of a survivor, is really a blur. And to commemorate the 15th anniversary and 10th, actually, I decided to chronicle minute by minute what that experience was like. Because so many people hear or see the black and white headlines about a sex assault and a home invasion, things like that, and they don't have to think about all the things that go into what that one victim experiences in that one day. And I wanted to bring to light all of the different things that go into that traumatic experience when you report, when you do have support, when you don't have support, and understanding a little bit more about that victim mentality and why it's so hard to say, well, this is what I would do in that scenario. You don't know what you would do until you're actually in it. So going through that process, it took 3 weeks for them to finally track this guy down. 2 rookie officers happened to cross him at a neighboring apartment complex. He was picking out his next victim. He was taken in for an interrogation for 7.5 hours. Part of that interrogation I do include in those keynote addresses because I want other people to understand the offender mentality as well, where there's no taking responsibility. There are just a slew of lies and talking in circles. And again, that's not the only response, but it's definitely a typical one. And having all of those different pieces come together when I tell this story helps illustrate the point that yeah, this isn't a statistically significant outcome because he was finally tried and convicted, but it is very typical when you look at the trauma response and the things that happened afterwards. So we are extremely lucky that he was caught, that he was prosecuted, and that we ended up in a jury trial where he was convicted by a jury of his peers and is still serving his 24 to life indefinite sentence here in the Colorado Department of Corrections.
Wow, what a story, what a program. I mean, I'm getting all the feels just hearing you describe the 911 call and the interview, and all of those pieces are so important to this whole story. Wow, that just completely blows me away. And after the sexual assault, you then suffered from depression, PTSD, frequent panic attacks. You struggled for the courage to reach out for help, and you coped with the trauma through binge drinking, promiscuity, which is, by the way, very common. It's a very common reaction among the survivors, and people don't always understand the long-term impact of a sexual assault. They think it's just that trauma, and then afterwards, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what is expected
you
to
just
happen
forget
afterwards.
about it, or just like pretend it didn't happen, or move on, or it's been long enough.
But it's impossible. I mean, you see
No.
all of the responses to trauma, and that lasts a lifetime, not like an hour after or a week after. We're talking about a lifetime of dealing with that. So I guess I'm wondering, how can the fraternity and sorority community that you know really well, how can they help to prevent this from happening to other students?
Sure. So this is a really good point, because I think fraternities and sororities often get a really bad rap when it has anything to do with domestic violence, sexual assault, or sexually violent crimes. I had the opposite experience, and maybe it's because of the time, maybe it's because it was so public. For that 3-week period where they didn't know who this guy was, they were questioning every single fraternity member that I knew. They were looking for some indication that maybe it was an acquaintance or something else. And it got everybody involved, whether we wanted it to be or not. I was extremely lucky because from the onset, I was believed. When I called 911, I was believed. When I cried out for my roommates, I was believed. The detectives believed me. And that's something that can start with your first responders, with your sorority members, your fraternity members, anybody on campus, your Title IX coordinators. And I realized that's an uphill battle. It's tough, but it's changing the culture and understanding that you don't have to have the right answers. It's not your job to play detective. It's to be there. It's to listen. And it's to say, I believe you. What can I do to help? It is that simple. And so changing that conversation and practicing really what I think media often tells us we shouldn't do. We need to scrutinize. And why are they coming forward now? Why all these years later? Well, why didn't you say anything? As soon as you start questioning why, you are removing the victim and their experience from that headline every single time. And so I think what sororities and fraternities really can do that most organizations can't is band together. There's accountability. There is important conversations about mental health, especially when, if you're like me, I didn't realize what PTSD was. I didn't realize that I was falling into this depression and having panic attacks and binge drinking. I went out not just because it's dollar bazookas at our local bar, but because I wanted to black out. I legitimately did not want to feel the feelings. And so I'm going for blackout drunk. I get it. Sometimes there's a nasty breakup and hello to the bottom of a wine glass. I get that part. But when you notice one of your brothers or sisters really binge drinking heavily or engaging in activities that maybe are a little more risky or promiscuous that are outside of their normal character, don't shame them for those. Start a conversation. Ask them, hey, like, what's going on? Is there something maybe that we need to talk about? As long as you can keep the blame and the shame out of it, because I guarantee you they're already feeling that way, whether they know it or not. If you can remove that from the conversation and legitimately just be an open ear and offer them some help and resources, you're going to get so much further with helping that individual person and changing your culture as a fraternity or a sorority organization. I was so lucky that my entire Greek community at the University of Northern Colorado rallied around me. We all showed up for every single court hearing. it was so funny because even today they will talk about when there was a hearing. It didn't matter if it was arraignment, if it was just a status conference, if we were going to be in the courtroom in front of the judge for even 5 minutes. Everybody was there in informal pin attire, and you could hear the stilettos clacking down the tile floor, and you knew that, well, it's that case that's on again, because everybody showed up. They were there to show the judge and everybody involved how much this impacted an entire community. And whether or not we know that sexual assault has occurred, it still has that ripple effect on the community.
Yeah, I'm so glad that the fraternity and sorority system really supported you. I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm so glad that you talked about survivors just wanting to be believed. I think that is the biggest thing, is that they're afraid to come forward many times because they're afraid nobody's going to believe them. So I think as a general rule, you just have to believe. Let the police or the university or whoever's doing the investigation, let them handle the investigation. It's not your job to figure out who did it. Okay. But you can believe the survivors. And I think that is a critical thing for any college student to understand. And so thank you.
And if you look at the research, you are going to have victims that typically outcry to 2 to 3 people before they make the choice to report. Mm-hmm. If one of those people is critical and does not believe them, it actually shuts down the reporting process. And then you have a cycle of violence where that person is going to get away with it and choose to create more victims. So you have the ability, whether or not you're victimized, to impact how many victimizations there are going forward. And it starts with you believing.
100%. And good for you in pointing out the fact that obviously this trauma then led to binge drinking and other risky behavior. So that way, if other college students see that, typically there's some underlying root cause why this person is trying to black out, not like one social drink. We're talking about blacking out on a regular basis. If you see that, there's probably some underlying reason why this person is engaging in this really risky behavior. It's to cover up, to mask, to numb their feelings on something that happened to them. And we have to treat that underlying cause in order to get any kind of progress. So thank you for pointing all of that stuff out. You did it masterfully. Now, as a criminal justice graduate student at UNC, you got involved in changing policies and impacting legislature on a state level. And what started as testimony in front of your own elected officials then exploded into this national conversation on victimization and self-defense. And then you fast forward to 2016. Now, all of a sudden, I'm watching you question President Obama during a live telecast of Anderson Cooper 360 on CNN. So how was your sexual assault ultimately hijacked by politicians and lobbies without your permission?
Well, how much time do we have here? So I made the really quality life choice of midway through my junior year, changing to psychology with a minor in criminal justice, because Kim wants to go to school forever. Yay. I don't know if any of you guys have seen Van Wilder before. Ryan Reynolds. Very nice. Look it up. But anyway, a lot of people go to school for 10 years. They're called doctors, and I am not. But I did decide to go on for my master's program, and I loved my criminal justice programming and my cohort, and just learning so much about the different facets that go into this system, which I didn't choose to be a part of. But now I'm there. I want to know everything that I can about it. Having that experience in the education system, while also working at the police department as a victim advocate, and later at the Weld County District Attorney's Office, where I was working with offenders and doing some pre-plea negotiations for low-level offenders that were typically the victims themselves, especially in domestic violence cases. I loved that I could apply my own empathy as being a survivor myself, my education, that you can learn it in 4 walls in a school, and it's not going to mean crap until you have the actual experience sitting there. It's great to draw upon those places, but it doesn't make a bit of difference what you've been through when the person in front of you is sitting there telling you about their own victimization. And so combining all of these things, I was like, look, there's some policies and some laws that just don't make sense. Most people see that and they'll send a tweet or something like, this is BS. And I just so happened to be like, this is BS and I want to tell somebody about it. And hey, all of these elected officials are supposed to work for the people. Why not me? I will be the first to tell you there was a bit of, well, it was Kim being naive mostly. And I had no idea that most people don't do that. I was just like, well, there's their email. It's right there on the website. Why wouldn't I do this? I had made the choice following the conviction. So we got that guilty verdict, and I made the choice to release my name to media because it was really important for me that people saw that there's this whole other story, that there are victims behind these black and white headlines. And I wanted more people to understand that if I can do this and I can get through it, that you probably can too. I didn't realize that my mission to help just one person, I didn't care, just one person not have to experience what I did, and it would be worth it, actually started the morning after that first article ran in our local papers, the Greeley Tribune. The Weld County District Attorney's Office got a call from a 78-year-old woman who was the victim of a stranger sex assault. She was basically in the same position as I was in throughout her case, but she was a non-cooperative witness. She did not want to take the stand. She didn't want to tell friends and family. She didn't want anything to do with it. And she called her victim advocate the next morning, and she's like, I read the paper this morning, and if Kim can do it, so can I. She put a serial rapist away for the rest of his life that fall. And I didn't know about that for many, many years, but it was just really cool to hear that, hey, this does make a difference. And there is that negative ripple effect when you're victimized, but there can also be that positive ripple effect by speaking up and not letting it own you. And so that was the message that I took to the legislature as well. It's like, hey, these bond conditions, they aren't fair to victims. Here's what we might be able to do. And that was all well and good until 2013, when the subject of gun control came up. I'm from Weld County in Colorado, which is an extremely rural, red community. And I had never been involved in politics in any capacity before. And so for us, carrying concealed up here and firearms are just kind of a part of your everyday life. I was always terrified of handguns, but after that experience of being completely defenseless, that was something that I chose. It took many years to feel comfortable with it. It's not something that I would tell anybody that they should do. It's completely personal choice. And that's the biggest part that we can keep going back to. Hey, this is all about the choices that you want to make. You have the autonomy over your body, over your consent, over what you would like to do when it comes to what's included in our Constitution and otherwise. That was all that I was there for. I wanted to tell them that, hey, I'm still on my college campus where I was victimized. This is something that I choose to do. For me, please don't take that right away. That was basically all it was. And to my knowledge, that conversation hadn't really been introduced, where you're talking about something like sexual assault, where it's pre-Me Too movement, it's pre some of these really big stories where you're just openly speaking about it. I felt fairly alone on an island. I didn't meet a whole lot of outspoken survivors. And it put those two in a conversation together and lit up headlines and media in a way that I hadn't experienced just talking about victimization and consent education. So that really changed a lot of things, but I am not only involved in legislative affairs when it comes to the Second Amendment. That's actually a really small piece of what I do. Talking to the Sex Offender Management Board about how we're labeling sex offenders. They want to call them clients, not sex offenders. And I'm like, hold up, let me tell you a little bit about this. Some of the things that we hear about criminal justice reform, those are great. Are they victim-centered? Making sure victims have a seat at the table to be able to talk about what it takes to become survivors and to still hold that space in our criminal justice system. There's so many things that need our attention and that need our voices, but because this epidemic is so shrouded in shame, I would still say, it makes it so that it's this emotional task every single time we want to speak about it. And we shouldn't have to say, hi, I am a victim of sex assault. That's why you should listen to me every time, but that's where we're at. And it keeps a lot of people from speaking up and raising their voices. But the more of us that continue to do so and speak up for what's right and protect our rights, the more progress that we're going to continue to make. And that's what I hope to inspire more people to do. Take action. It doesn't matter if the cards are stacked against you. Getting the public involved and letting them know what's going on at your local, state, and national level is key.
That's a great message. I hope more college students will run with that, because they don't even realize how much power they have and how easily they can get involved in politics. And think about the entire fraternity and sorority community supporting you. You have this built-in network of people that can support you in that. But, you know, I also have great disappointment with all the politics that surround sexual assault. It is interesting to see that intersection between sexual assault and the Second Amendment. But I remember speaking about sexual assault back in 2013, and I was actually told that there was no reason for me to speak about it, that the 1 in 5 number in terms of women who experience a sexual assault, this was just a made-up statistic from the Obama administration. This is what I was literally told. So they felt that there was no need for me to talk about sexual assault on college campuses. And I'm like, what? I'm on a college campus every week. Like, are you not paying attention to what's going on here? So how do we move sexual assault conversations from being political to just a human rights issue that is important to everybody?
Yeah, no, and you're right. That statistic isn't right. It's actually 1 in 3. And so there's another fun statistic that I typically point out, and that males are more likely to be victimized than they are to be accused falsely of sex assault. And so if we're not including male victims in this conversation, you're missing a huge part of the population as well. Now, granted, it happens when they're younger, but once you are victimized, your likelihood of being victimized after the age of 18, in addition to that first one, goes up by like over 50% or something. And I'd have to check the exact statistic from In Violence Against Women International. But there is a huge conversation that can take place when you're talking about moving this back into the middle. This has no political home, nor should it. And anyone looking to co-opt that message of advocacy or survivor rights is not doing it for anything besides their own political gain. I had to learn that the hard way. I thought I was teaming up with a huge national organization to get my word out there. And hey, I was victimized. This is a personal choice that I'm making. And now I can reach this whole new group of people to talk about advocacy efforts and best practices in the criminal justice field and all the things that I have held near and dear to my heart since 2006. And I had to learn the hard way that, well, we're only going to use this when it works for us. We're not going to give you consent over when or how we use your story. And if you talk back to us, we are going to threaten you and make sure that you understand exactly how small you are. That sucks to learn, especially with something that is so emotional and tied to your core. And it happens on both sides. That is not something that's unique to one side or the other. But that's what I talked about in my TED Talk. I want people to understand that this isn't a political issue. It's a human rights issue. If you are thinking that one side or the other has a monopoly on victimization or criminal justice reform or whatever it might be, you've got to get yourself out of that headspace first. It's up to you to make those individual decisions. And I promise you, one of the best ways to bring people more towards the middle is listening to stories just like mine. Doesn't matter what I go on to believe or to do. The trauma that was inflicted upon me and my community left a reverberation that has no political home. And none of these do. And when you think about the frequency with which they're happening, the minute that you exclude half of the population because of who they decided to vote for one year, you're already setting yourself up for failure. You have to leave this conversation open to anyone, and you have to be willing to listen.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. So thank you so much for laying all of that out there for us. And, you know, I like to leave my programs on a positive note. And I think the positive note here is you ultimately married your hero. Tell us about that story with Michael.
Okay, I promise this isn't weird. We didn't used to talk about this in like speeches or publicly, because everybody that knows us knows obviously how we met. And then you have people that hear about it for the first time, they're like, blink, blinkety blink, what? Kind of doing a double take. I met my husband the day that I walked into the district attorney's office for that first meeting. He was the chief deputy district attorney that was assigned to prosecute my case. I was 20 years old at the time. Nothing weird happened. It was like, hey, I have this really strong connection with somebody who's going to court and fighting for me. And oh, by the way, has this huge docket and is doing the exact same thing for so many other people. With the outcome of my case and just speaking up about it, Mike and I stayed in touch for a while. We lost touch for a few years, but then we started doing these speeches together where like I'm using my education, background, empathy. He's doing the same to present this really comprehensive course on how you can best respond to victims, how to get them through the criminal justice process and make sure that they leave that, I don't want to say that era, but that time that they had to spend in the justice system, a better person, a more whole person, somebody who is set up for success from there on, because it's tough. And we've been doing this speech now for all of these years. And as I was getting ready to leave the DA's office and pursue another line of work, it was like, oh, wait, you've been here all along. And so we have always been connected in that way, but it's great. Yeah, he's 100% my hero, but he will say the exact same thing about me. And I never have to explain to him the very worst thing that happened in my life because he has lived it and he's fought for victims and survivors just like me every single day since.
Wow, what an amazing story. I mean, oh my God, that is just a best-selling book if I have ever heard of one.
We've been approached a couple times. I might decide.
Oh my goodness, wow.
He'll roll his eyes and be like, oh, that's weird.
I mean, you and I, we're going to have to talk about a book because I love publishing books and boy, oh boy, what a story. Anyway.
Well, Mike's not in unless Denzel Washington plays him, apparently. Who knows?
Now, I wanted to ask you one more thing. You've built up this huge following on TikTok. You have 327,000 followers on TikTok, which to me seems like a great outlet for you during the pandemic when so many of the universities have gone away from the in-person programming. I'm just curious, what has it been like to shift to this digital platform, social media, as opposed to the more traditional in-person speaking that you were accustomed to?
It's been wild. I got on there first because our teen son wanted to have an account. And so I was like, all right, I'll get on to monitor it. I've always been pretty social media savvy, but I'm like, ooh, look, cat videos and mom videos. And my FYP started getting a little more algorithmed to a fault probably. But as I was on there more, I'm just making a total dork out of myself and doing dances. I got a floor burn on my forehead from scooting across to an 80s song, like dumb stuff. But once I hit that 10,000 mark, I was like, wait a second, I'm seeing the people that I talk to on campuses here. Why is no one meeting them where they are? And so I took a pivot from my other platforms and the advocacy that I do there to TikTok. And it's great because I can just sit there with my ring light and I can do my makeup. I have a little live that I do sometimes called Crime and Contour. Yeah, I made that up myself. I'll sit there and do my makeup and then answer questions about victimization or best practices. And it's really cool because it's like the Q&A session that I so miss from those in-person speeches. That's my favorite part, is getting to connect with the audience and hanging out afterwards and asking and answering questions. So having that platform and building this, holy cow, amazing community of survivors and first responders and people who just want to learn how to be a better supporter has been so rewarding, and I love it. And I am not scared to make a total idiot out of myself, but I love seeing all of the fraternities and sororities that are joining and making the best of that while I'm over here like, hey, I was cool once, just so you guys know, make the choices. But I can also like intermix those fun videos with really important conversations.
Yeah, you're still cool. So don't think for a second that time.
Yeah, my kids don't.
I love it. So we do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. And I know that in Windsor, Colorado, there's got to be some good food. I'm wondering, where do you and your husband, Michael, where do you go for a great meal?
So typically we have to eat at home because we have so many children to feed. Okay, so you had sent the questions ahead of time, and I was talking to Mike about this. I'm like, where should I say something fancy? La la la. I was like, that wouldn't be me. All right, so we love Roma, which is a local pizza shop. It used to be just like 2 blocks or so down from the Alpha Phi House at UNC, and it had been there since the 70s. You went there totally knowing that it's gonna take you an hour to be served a drink, and bras are optional, and there's like no rules, but holy crap, it's so good. And I eat cream cheese on my pizza, no shame there, but they're huge, and it's, oh my gosh, all of the things. So I love me some Roma. I'm not going to pretend to be super classy and say like, oh, Chimney Park, where they send all these wine pairings, blah, blah, blah. That pizza pairs really well with card Bordeaux. Love that for me. And then the other place that we love isn't actually food. It's Timnath Beer Works. So it's right next to Windsor. They have food trucks though. And that's like how we discover some new foods or different things that we wouldn't have had otherwise. But the brewery there is amazing. It's a small little family-owned business, and you can bring in your own food if you want to, but we absolutely love it there. And we just celebrated, I threw Mike a surprise birthday party, and we had it there, and it was so much fun. So I'd love to have other very fancy Yelp approved recommendations, but like legit love me some Roma.
Yeah, we just want you to be you, Kim. Forget about the fancy stuff. I mean,
what you wish for.
Roma, we're going to Roma.
Hell yes. And they have bazooka drink. Okay, I do not binge drink anymore, but we should at least point out that I am adverse to the things that are really bad. And they have these drinks that are called bazookas. And oh my God, in college, that's where you'd go and hang out and eat your pizza and have these humongous, amazing drinks. And still here I am on the wrong side of my 30s. Like, I'll have a small one, thanks.
I love it. This has been so much fun and so informative, so educational, and this message has to go out to all the college students. So if our student listeners, if they want to bring you in as a speaker on sexual assault prevention, where's the best place for them to go and connect with you?
The best place to reach me is definitely through my website. It's Kimberly Corban, which is CORBAN.com. There's a contact form there. You can get a better idea of my story or some of the videos. I try to update that as often as possible, but as per usual, always on TikTok, Instagram, the places with the DMs, just slide on in. I might miss some of them, but yeah, the website is definitely the best way to reach out. Plus, I just love connecting with people, and memes and sarcasm, that's my jam, so I speak those fluently.
I love it. Kimberly, you are my hero. I just absolutely love the work that you're doing. I love just how authentic you are. I think it just resonates, and audience members just literally just gravitate to this story, and they're like, oh my God, tell me what happened next. I mean, it's just such a fascinating story from so many different avenues. It's like, I don't even know where to go. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much to talk about. But you
Every
did a
single
great
speech
job.
is different for that exact reason. So I never know what I'm going to get.
All right. Well, listen, to our listeners, if you enjoyed this talk with Kim, please like it. Please share it with other college students, because it's super important that Kim's message goes out to the masses. So we want to make this viral. Please like it and share it. Kim, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you. It was awesome being here with you. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And we hope to see everybody on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much. Bye for now.